This podcast is part of the Everyday Heroes Podcast Network, the network for first responders and those who support them.
Okay, welcome back to Scissors and Scrubs. I'm Nicole.
I'm Laura.
And normally we had planned a lovely week of bombing and death and destruction with Hiroshima, but, NBC New York put out an article about the rise of polio up in the Hudson Valley area.
Yes.
Apparently somebody overseas got live polio vaccines, which if you are unvaccinated, you can contract polio from somebody who has had a live polio vaccine.
Yes.
You know, polio that was eradicated in 1979. And now is making a comeback.
It's so much
We're
fun.
bringing polio back. Hey, what's next? Measles?
Oh, God, that'll be
Rubella?
fun.
Mumps? Let's bring it all back.
Yeah.
Just stop vaccinating everybody.
Right.
Let's bring all this shit back.
Just have rashes galore.
Can't wait. So what we are going to do for your listening pleasure is we are going to release the vaccine episode we did before COVID,
Yes.
where we yelled at everybody to get vaccinated. So if you are strong against vaccinations, skip till you get to Hiroshima in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Or maybe listen.
You might learn
something.
something
Yeah.
because we talk about the polio epidemics and why the vaccine actually came out and the dangers. Polio is no joke.
No.
It can leave you crippled. It can stop you from breathing. It's not a fun disease.
No.
So there is a reason we have developed all of this stuff. So listen to that, and then we will follow you up with Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
It's going to be joyous summer.
I know.
Yay!
Way to close it out.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Scissors and Scrubs. This is our probably most controversial episode so far because we are going to discuss vaccines. This is going to be a hard one to keep my personal feelings out of it.
I am just going straight up
Factual.
CDC.gov facts.
Bing, bing, bing.
And a family story.
Vaccines. So we are at the end of the summer series. We're getting ready for back to school, which is why we chose now is probably the perfect time for the vaccine episode. Because now's the time you're all getting your little letters saying, have your kids been vaccinated?
Right. Send in all your vaccines.
Right.
Yep.
So we're just going to tell about a couple of epidemics that have struck the world.
And why we get vaccinated.
And why they have vaccinations to follow. They're no joke. I think people are so complacent today because these diseases are eradicated or you don't see how detrimental they are.
Right. You don't see the problem.
Right. And so they think, oh, well, my kid's not going to get that.
I don't need the vaccines.
Yeah. So we'll get more into that part of it later. Sparkles, it's your show.
My time to shine?
Your time to shine, baby.
So I did polio.
Polio.
Yeah. So I did polio because I have an aunt that had polio in the 50s. So I thought I could get a little personal with it. I've seen somebody affected by it.
It was quite a sweep of the nation.
I know what polio is, and I have an aunt that had polio, but I had some of this stuff. I was like, what? It was
crazy.
It's ridiculous. So I'll go
I
over
think of polio. I'm sorry to interrupt because apparently I do that all the time.
all the time.
I think of polio. I just think of the wards of iron lungs.
Yes.
Which was before ventilators. You were in a machine that breathed for you, and you
Pretty
couldn't
much.
get out of it.
For months. Yeah. Well,
Or ever.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
I do. talk about
Polio
that.
is all yours, my love.
So I'm going to tell you what polio is, the symptoms of polio, some treatments that they used to have, the vaccine, we'll get all into it. So I got this all from cdc.gov. Polio, poliomyelitis, is a potentially deadly infectious disease. It's caused by the polio virus, which spreads from infected person to person. It's very contagious. The virus lives in the infected person's throat and intestines.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Can you poop it out?
Yeah, so that's how people got it.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I didn't know that.
You know,
really didn't know that.
if something was contaminated with feces, which, it happens. That's how we get a lot of viruses.
You wipe the wrong way, you got it.
Yeah, it's on your hand. You touch something, somebody else touches it, now you get polio.
Oh, my God.
So it enters the body through the mouth. you touch something, then you touched your mouth, and now it's in your mouth, and now
which kids do all the time.
That's why it was a huge childhood disease. Enters the body through the mouth. It spreads through contact with feces, or in a much less common. It can also spread through droplets from a cough or a sneeze, because it does live in your throat as well. But it's much harder to get that way. An infected person can spread the virus immediately before and up to 2 weeks after symptoms appear. So you don't know you're sick
for a while.
You don't wipe well, or you touch something and somebody else touches it, you can spread it even if you don't have any symptoms. It can live in infected person's feces for many weeks. It can contaminate food and water in unsanitary conditions, obviously.
It's a nasty little bug.
Yeah. It lives for a little while. Even if a person does not have the symptoms, they can still spread the disease. Symptoms. Some people, most people infected with polio, about 72 out of 100, will not have any visible symptoms.
Okay.
So
you're a carrier, but not.
Yeah, you can get this virus, but you're not sick with it.
Okay.
About 1 out of 4 people with polio virus will have flu-like symptoms, like sore throat, fever, tiredness, nausea, headache, stomach pain. It lasts for about 2 to 5 days and goes away all on their own. So you just think you have, like, the bug.
Right.
A smaller portion of people will develop serious symptoms that affect the brain and spinal cord.
Oh.
Paresthesia, which is the feeling of pins and needles in your legs. Meningitis, which is an infection of the spinal cord and or the brain. That occurs in about 1 out of 25 people. Paralysis, can't move parts of the body, or weakness in the arms, legs, or both. That occurs in about 1 out of 200 people. Paralysis is the most severe symptom because it may lead to permanent disability or death. Between 2 and 10 out of 100 people who develop paralysis with polio die because the virus affects the muscles that help them breathe.
The diaphragm.
Yeah. So it paralyzes your diaphragm.
Oh
you can't breathe. Yeah. That's how you die.
Oh.
There's also a thing called post-polio syndrome. It occurs, these children would seem like they were fully recovered, but then they can develop new muscle pain, weakness, or paralysis 15 to 40 years later.
Years?
Yes. Years.
That would suck.
I never heard of that.
God, that would suck.
Yeah. You think you're fine.
Yeah.
You're completely
40 years
healed,
later,
and 40
boom.
years later, yeah, you get some paralysis. So polio, like, we don't see it anymore. But back in the day, there were all these epidemics.
Mm-hmm.
So the polio epidemics have been recorded in the U.S. back to 1841. And from 1916 onward, a polio epidemic occurred every summer in at least one part of the country. So every single summer from 1916 on, there was an epidemic of polio. It's not even like somewhat, it's an epidemic.
I'm going to tell you, I don't think I ever, if I had to go back in time, it sure as hell wouldn't be fucking 1900 till like 1950.
Yeah, it's a lot of
they
epidemics.
died from everything.
Yeah.
Nope. I'm all set.
Yeah.
Nope.
The most serious of those epidemics occurred in the 1940s and 1950s. They would, it's back in the day. So they would quarantine people. They would put stickers on their doors saying, Laura D has polio. Don't come into her house. Don't touch anything. Call you out.
HIPAA wasn't a big thing back
No, they would put it right on your door. This person has polio. Don't come near them. Don't touch anything they touched. They canceled public meetings. They closed movie theaters. They, warned kids, don't go near water fountains. Don't drink out of water fountains. Don't go to the beach. Don't go to a public pool because this is all places where you can pick up
you could get it anywhere.
polio. Right, but I think it's just more, don't put your mouth near the water fountain where someone else drinks.
Pool. How
People
about
are in
that?
the pool with their,
their dirty butts.
Yeah. Originally, most cases occurred in children 6 months to 4 years old.
Oh,
and they usually had mild symptoms. And then they developed a lifelong immunity.
Oh, okay.
So originally, that's how it would come out. Then as time passed, sanitation improvements and better hygiene meant most small children had fewer chances of getting it.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't pick it up because everything was cleaner. They were given clean water.
Right.
So they couldn't pick it up as easily. So then it was seen more in older children and young adults.
Okay.
So that means kids growing up didn't have that immunity that they were getting when they were babies, getting this disease as like a flu.
Yeah. It's more severe now as they're getting older.
And they were more likely to get the paralytic form
Oh.
when they got it as older children.
So if they just stayed dirty, they'd have been fine?
Right. If they didn't clean up, probably
Wash
would
your
have been
hands
okay.
after you poop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In 1952, that was the worst epidemic in U.S. history. Of 57,628 cases of polio, 3,145 people died, and 21,269 people were left with some form of paralysis in like a summer.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. But that epidemic is credited with like heightening fears in parents and people all around the country. So it really pushed them for a vaccine.
Okay.
So that epidemic really pushed it. Like something's got to be done. This is really awful. So there was all these treatments that would happen all these summers.
Can't wait to hear some of these.
There was like this vitamin C treatment where they would flood the back of your throat with vitamin C. It was a lot. I was like, what? I think it was like a
says it.
throat lavage of vitamin C. It didn't really help though. So.
I never liked the word lavage either. I'm not gonna throat lavage. That just sounds awful.
It does sound awful.
I'm gonna give you a throat lavage.
It's bad enough when you have to gargle. Yeah. Never mind with polio in your throat. So one of the treatments was an iron lung. That was probably like the biggest treatment that everybody knows about polio. The iron lung. It was invented by Philip.
Iron lung.
No. Drink?
Philip Drink.
I think so.
Drank.
Don't quote me on that. Louis Agassiz Shaw?
Yeah.
And
Agassiz?
maybe?
I think it's Agassiz. I like that.
Another
like the
guy
tennis
named James. At Harvard.
Just James.
They worked at Harvard. They
came
developed
up with
this iron lung.
An iron lung.
Yep.
I saw a movie when I was a kid with a person in an iron lung.
Oh my God.
Scarred me.
The pictures of them lined up. We
just
have to
laying
post
there.
those.
Like all you could do was lay there and look at a mirror.
Yeah.
Like
We'll definitely post pictures of the
I would
wards of
rather
iron
be
lungs.
dead than be in a goddamn
I
iron lung.
I can't imagine. So the iron lungs were used for patients with bulbar polio, which bulbar polio is when the polio virus affects your brainstem, which controls your swallowing reflexes. So you can't swallow any of your secretions, so they collect in your throat, and then they can lead to suffocation.
Okay, how about just suction? Can we just come up with a suction?
So I guess, I don't know if it went further down, like into your chest. That's what they used them for.
The iron lung seems a little bit excessive.
It does seem excessive. So, an iron lung, a patient laid in a metal tube with just their head sticking out. It's literally just their head sticking out. The original one was powered by an electric motor, and it was attached to 2 vacuum cleaners. I mean, we're talking like a long time ago.
Harvard came up with 2 fucking vacuum cleaners.
In an iron lung.
And the hoovering. All right, Joe, get in. I'm going to put these 2 vacuum cleaners on the end. See if the suctions come up.
So it worked by changing the pressure inside the machine. They were smart.
Yeah, I would never have thought to stick somebody in a tube with 2 vacuum cleaners to get rid of their secretions.
No. So when the pressure is lowered, they suck all the air out with the vacuum cleaners, your chest cavity expands. And when the pressure is raised, they blow air back in. The chest cavity contracts.
Okay.
So it mimics your breathing. So it helps.
It's like a ventilator.
It's a ventilator before there was these positive pressure ventilators. So it mimics your breathing so you can breathe, so your lungs keep going. Then John Emerson modified the iron lung by using bellows that were directly attached to the machine, I guess, instead of the vacuum cleaners. And that iron lung was produced until 1970. They were still making them up until 1970.
I just have a little side story. So my mother and my parents had these tickets to the North Shore Music Theater. And she's like, come see this play with me. I don't even know what the hell the fucking play was about. She's like, come see this play with me. I'm like, fine. And we're like 3 rows back from the stage, okay? And they're trying really hard with the props. And they bring a guy out in an iron lung, okay? He's got the bellows underneath. But he must have been in the iron lung working the bellows.
Oh, God.
So they're going up like all rickety and shit. And I look at this prop, and I immediately burst out laughing. I can't stop laughing. And then my mother's laughing because I'm laughing. And she's like, what? I'm like, look at the iron lung. Look at the iron lung. And it's like, wee. I could not stop laughing. Yeah. And this is supposed to be like the most serious part.
Well, he's in an iron lung. I mean,
you never want to take me to a play because a cat's, the ending of it, when he goes off in the top, like that big rubber tire, was the worst play I've ever seen in my life. I'm hysterical laughing because it was so ridiculous. I am not the person to have to be serious with. Let's just say that.
It doesn't sound like it.
No. Okay, I'm sorry. So back to the iron lung bellows vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, so they...
1970.
Updated, and they made them until 1970. There was also the Bragg Paul pulsator, which was the first intermittent abdominal pressure ventilator. It was literally like a
vibrator?
No. It was like a not a tourniquet. Like a tourniquet on your chest and your abdomen. And it was hooked up to
a pulsator?
A pressure machine. And it would squeeze you in and let it out and squeeze you in and let it out. So it was it was...
Oh, you were more mobile than standing in a tube.
Well, you were still laying down, but you had this big cuff on your chest.
All right.
And it was pushing in, pushing out, like another, like mimicking your breathing. And then there was also a rocking bed for less critical breathing difficulties.
Who's gonna
so just moved you back and forth.
Rocking bed.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds soothing. I mean, that doesn't sound awful. So the iron lung... What?
I could use one of those now.
I know. The iron lung saved thousands of lives. But there were tons of problems with it. It was huge. Mm-hmm. Cumbersome. Like you can't go to your cousin's house in your iron lung.
I'm coming for Christmas. Do we have an extra table for me?
Can you move some chairs aside?
The lung's coming.
Yeah. And it was expensive. Yeah. In the 1930s, it cost $1,500, which sounds ridiculous now because like an EpiPen costs that much. But in the 1930s, that was the same price as a house.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were.
But you could technically move your family into the iron lung.
You could,
I mean, it's pretty big.
It was roomy.
Stay at my feet. You can sleep by my side.
Yeah, one of you can sit right by my head. My favorite.
Yeah, you can get under the mirror.
Yeah. The cost of running the machine was also like extremely prohibitive with the use, especially since people were in them for months, years, or the rest of their lives.
I would rather be dead.
I can't imagine.
Like when you see a picture of these things,
I cannot
you
imagine.
have no life.
You know when you get an MRI?
Yes.
And you have to lay in that tube for like 40 minutes? I want to cry.
Now you're in a tube for the rest of your life.
Forever. Months. Just lay here in this tube.
No,
I can't do it.
Nope.
But even with the iron lung, that saved thousands of people. The death rate for people with bulbar polio exceeded 90%.
Oh.
Even with the iron lung. These drawbacks, though, they led to the development of modern positive pressure ventilators and positive pressure ventilation by tracheostomy.
Yes. So now, like, if you see somebody in a wheelchair sometimes, like a quadriplegic, they have the little trach in, and there's a ventilator on the wheelchair.
Right. And you
so
can
they're much more mobile.
Take it with you.
Yeah. You really can go to Christmas dinner on that.
Yes. And positive pressure ventilators decrease mortality in bulbar patients from 90% to 20%.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge.
Huge. I mean, it's ridiculous. In the Copenhagen epidemic of 1952, large numbers of patients were handbagged by anyone there. Like, they'd have med students do it, but then they even had, like, if you were visiting your cousin, you were handbagging
for like years?
I think until they got a little better. Because there was so many patients.
Oh.
And they had so little vents because these were just coming out, these positive pressure vents. So that, like, apparently they just had anybody venting these people. So back in the day, there were surgical treatments that were just thought to be wonderful. There was nerve grafting, tendon lengthening, tendon transfers, limb lengthening, and shortening.
Ooh. How would you shorten it?
I think to match up with your other leg. Like if one of your legs
was... So they fuck with the good leg.
I think so.
That just makes no sense at all. It's just silly talk.
Yeah. These treatments were used extensively, and they found out these treatments weren't really any good. Also, patients with residual paralysis were treated with braces. They were taught to compensate with crutches, wheelchairs, calipers. Massage was used. None of these things ended up being really very much good.
Right.
Because they would put these people in these braces that were like so hard and
You see pictures of them.
Rigid.
Yeah.
That they couldn't use it. So then everything in that leg that wasn't dead now died because they couldn't use the leg. Yeah, you see pictures of those old braces, and they'd have to like hit them to straighten them out and stuff. There were serums that were made in 1950.
Snake water?
I don't know. Maybe. In 1950, William Hammond he isolated a serum from the blood of polio survivors. So he took blood from polio survivors, isolated this serum. Between 1951 and 1952, 55,000 kids were in a clinical trial of this serum. Results were good. It prevented paralytic polio in 80% of the time of the patients that they tried it on, and it lessened the symptoms when they did get polio. So they got like those flu-like symptoms. Did something. However, it had to be re-injected during each outbreak. The immunity only lasted 5 weeks, and it was super expensive. And they couldn't really narrow down like when they should give it. But this started people working on a vaccine. They were like, okay, this is working. Something's helping. We
got something going here.
Yeah. In 1935, Maurice Brodie attempted a vaccine. He got this from the virus in ground up monkey spinal cords.
Rabies is ground up like rabbit spinal cords or something.
Yep.
So
that
he vaccine
killed whatever was in these spinal cords in formaldehyde and then just ground it up and
here you go, have a little bit of this.
Injected it into people. Yep. So first he gave it to himself, which was good. I mean, it's always good to test on yourself first. And his assistants. Then 3,000 children. There were many allergic reactions.
Oh, I wouldn't imagine so.
Yeah, but no immunity ever came from that vaccine.
Monkey spinal cords.
Monkey spinal.
That's awesome.
Yep.
They started liking bananas a lot.
Yeah.
Started cleaning each other, taking lice off.
Oh, I can't stand it. In the late 40s and early 50s, a research group headed by John Enders at Boston Children's Hospital.
Oh, Boston. We just kick ass. We really do. Sorry, guys.
They successfully cultivated the polio virus in human tissue. So this was a huge breakthrough that would lead to the vaccines that eventually came about. Him and his team won the Nobel Prize in 1954 for this research.
And what was his name?
John Enders.
But he doesn't get a lot of credit for it.
I mean, I've never heard his name.
Right.
He won. I mean, he won a Nobel Prize.
Right. Okay.
He didn't make the vaccine.
Okay.
But he figured out how to cultivate the polio virus in human tissue. So then there's this Kenny regimen. It's like the start of physical therapy.
Okay.
Is what happened during the polio. So early on, when polio would come out and everyone was sick and paralyzed and couldn't move their leg, it was a school of thought to rest the affected muscles. And the suggestion was to apply splints to the affected limbs.
Which is exactly what you should do.
Right. They thought it would prevent tightening of muscles, tendon, ligaments, or skin that would prevent normal movement. However, these people would be in plastic casts for months, which then caused atrophy of the muscles in both affected and non-affected limbs.
So is this why they have like shriveled up limbs?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
so it's not the disease really, it was the treatment.
No, the polio did kill
affect what it looked like.
The muscles.
Okay.
But then some of these people would also then have casts on that, and then they couldn't get out of bed because they'd be in like these body casts. Okay. So then their other leg would also be atrophied, even though that leg was fine. Right. Or whatever tissue was left in their bad leg. Didn't get worked, so then that would atrophy. So it was just worse.
Okay, so that's why they got deformed on top of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
In 1940, Sister Elizabeth Kenny is an Australian bush nurse. She comes over to North America, and she's like, no, you guys are wrong. We're not doing that.
The first person to say that to us.
Yeah, she flew all the way over here to tell us we were wrong.
You guys are wrong.
Stupid. She had developed a form of physical therapy while treating polio cases in rural Australia between 1928 and 1940. Instead of immobilizing patients, she relieved pain and spasms by applying hot, moist packs to the affected areas. And she had them do early activity and exercise to maximize the strength of unaffected muscle fibers and promote neuroplastic recruitment of remaining nerve cells.
Very smart of her for that time, to be honest with you.
Very. Like,
know that,
when
like,
everybody else is like, no, lay down and don't move for 6 months.
And don't touch it.
She's like, no, move it. Get those muscles working. Even the affected muscles, they're going to get stronger if you work them. She ended up settling in Minnesota. She established the Sister Kenny Rehabilitation Institute and began to educate people worldwide, like, you need to move these muscles or they're going to be worse. By the mid-20th century, this was the hallmark for treating polio. And it is still, with like anti-spasmodic drugs, is still the treatment for people with polio around the world. So Sister Kenny is smart.
I just don't know. Why would she settle in Minnesota?
I'm like, she came from Australia and settled in Minnesota?
Like, there's nothing against Minnesota.
It's like the opposite end of the world, though.
It seems like a frozen, barren wasteland.
And she came
from a warm
Australia.
climate.
I found that odd, too. I'm glad you said it.
All right. Maybe we'll have to go to Minnesota and see what it's all about.
Maybe.
See why she went up there.
So
I just don't see anything.
I don't get it.
Okay.
So we now have a polio vaccine, obviously. So the only prevention
you have to have 4
is
to 5 doses before you go to school. I know.
Only prevention for polio is the polio vaccine. There are 2 types of vaccine. The oral poliovirus vaccine was introduced, I think, in 1963. They have stopped using it in the U.S. I think the last time they used it was 2000. It's still used in much of the world. It's a live vaccine that you take orally.
It's the drink the kids
Yes,
get.
but it's a live virus.
Yep.
The IPV, which is the inactivated polio vaccine, was the one that was developed by Jonas Salk.
Jonas Salk.
Which we all, everybody's heard of his name.
That's with polio. That's his thing.
So he developed the IPV. The IPV, like giving it out, testing it out, dosing it out, was the largest medical experiment in history.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Isn't that crazy? Like they tested it on so many, it was the largest experiment in history. 99 out of 100 children that receive all recommended doses of the IPV vaccine will be protected from polio completely.
I've never had it.
Yep.
Had my vaccine. I've never had polio.
Right. So why do we get a vaccine? It was obviously one of the most feared diseases in the U.S. In the 1950s, those polio outbreaks that I said were like the worst in history caused more than 15,000 cases of paralysis every year in the U.S.
That's a lot.
It's ridiculous.
And imagine thinking you have a beautiful, healthy child. God forbid they get polio. Now they're going to be in a lung or they're going to,
Yeah. Following the introduction of IPV in 1955 and OPV in 1963, the number of polio cases dropped to less than 100 in the 1960s from like 50,000.
Yeah.
And then to less than 10 in the 1970s.
I think, do you know anybody besides your aunt?
No, and that was in the 1950s.
Right. I don't know a single person who's ever had polio.
No. Polio has been eliminated in the U.S., completely eliminated in the U.S. due to the vaccine.
Yeah. I bet you it starts coming back.
So since 1979, no cases of polio have originated in the United States. None. And the epidemic in 1979 was in, oh my God.
Africa.
No, it was in the U.S.
Asia.
No, it was in the U.S. It was
Ohio.
the last one in the U.S.
Minnesota.
The Amish.
All the Amish.
It was in the Amish communities.
Those renegades.
But they don't,
the renegades.
follow all of the normal rules. So that's the last time that it originated was in Amish country. It has been brought into the U.S. though by travelers. The last time that happened was 1993. And obviously we have to maintain a high immunity in the population,
or it's going to come
through
back.
the vaccine to keep the U.S. polio free. We are completely polio free.
Yeah.
Let's keep it that
way.
We
were completely measles free too.
I know. No one wants polio.
No.
No one wants this for their kids.
You don't want any of these diseases.
No.
There is a reason there were vaccines for all of them, because they were deadly diseases.
And even if you didn't die, you had terrible
side effects.
Yeah.
You want to live in an iron lung for the rest of your life?
Oh, God,
yeah, no. I'm all set.
So my aunt, she's my father's one of 5, and this is the oldest sister. So I said to her, Auntie, we're doing one of the podcasts on vaccines, and I was going to do polio. And if you would just tell me, because I don't think I've ever heard her story. I knew she had it because she has a very one of her legs is very, very skinny, like skin and bones. So we always knew when we were little, they were like, oh, she had polio, you know, like that's why her leg looks like that. Okay, you know. But I never heard like what happened or, you know, anything. So I said, if you want to, great. And she's like, right away. Absolutely give me a few days though, because it's going to take a little while. I said, okay. So this is her letter. I'm just going to read it because there's a lot of stuff.
I love it coming from their words anyway.
Yeah. So it says August 1955. Family. Mom, dad, my aunt, who was 6.5, my father, who was 4.5. And she's not sure if her mom knew, but she was approximately 3 to 4 pregnant with my other aunt. 3 to 4 weeks pregnant with my other aunt. And she said, according to my grandmother, her mother, by mid-August, my aunt had developed a fever that came and went. She said, I think they were thinking some little summer bug. Labor Day weekend, I was getting ready to start first grade. She was very excited. However, on the first day of school, either September 6th or 7th, my life was turned upside down. I woke and started down the hall to my parents' bedroom and fell before I reached their door. I could not stand up. Our family doctor was called and arrived at our house. Yes, they did house calls and confirmed polio. According to my parents, Dr. Freeman said because of the epidemic, there was no room at Boston Children's Hospital.
Wow.
And he suggested that they confine me to my room and use the Sister Kenny method of treatment.
Thank God.
Yeah. The treatment consisted of placing wet hot towels on my legs several times a day and then exercising my legs, bending, lifting, etc., to keep the muscles moving. According to info sources, Sister Elizabeth Kenny was an Australian bush nurse who had developed this controversial new approach to treating polio. Up until this point, conventional treatment was to use plastic casts on affected limbs. Sister Kenny's type of rehab became the foundation of physical therapy. Like I said, my aunt and I were so
compatible.
Yeah. I found out years later that Dr. Freeman had polio as a child. She says, I wondered why he had walked with a limp.
And now you know why he went into it specifically.
Right. And he was treated with this method, with this Sister Kenny method. In hindsight, it was a blessing that Dr. Freeman was our family doctor and the hospital was overcrowded because my legs would have been casted and I would have been isolated in a very overcrowded ward with many other children. For at least the next month, the fever returned very high as the virus ran its course. I don't remember much during that period, just the stories that I was lethargic and definitely out of it. Once the fever finally left, I was able to sit up in bed but still could not walk. My mother and grandmother continued the hot towels and exercising my legs. Recovery was slow, not much energy. I remember listening to a children's story on the radio and watching the World Series on our very small black and white TV. For a 6-year-old, very boring. At some point, probably November or December, I had an appointment at Children's Hospital Polio Clinic in Boston. Now they have a concussion clinic. We don't need a polio clinic anymore because we don't have that. Where I received my first pair of wooden crutches. I was definitely one of the lucky ones. There were kids of all ages crowded into a waiting room to see doctors, physical therapists, etc. Some were in wheelchairs, some with casts, and some with braces. It was so overwhelming. When I had an appointment, we would get there around 8:30 a.m. and not leave until around noon. A lot of the time was just sitting waiting to see the next white coat. I had a yearly appointment at Children's for the next 12 years until I turned 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it does come back.
Yeah. By December of 1955, I was walking pretty well with the use of crutches. So after the new year, I was finally able to attend school. The city, they lived in Somerville, had supplied a tutor for about 6 weeks. Once in school, the strength in my legs seemed to get better. My right leg was less affected and always stronger than the left, but not 100%. I was definitely aware of what I could and couldn't do. During one of my appointments when I was around 13, doctors discovered that my left leg was shorter than my right. My heel cord and tendon on the bottom of my foot had stopped growing. Ugh. For the next 6 weeks, I had weekly visits to Children's where they placed my left leg in a cast with a wedge in the back by the heel to try to stretch it. Each week, they would replace the cast with a new one and a larger wedge. It was very painful.
I was going to say, that must have hurt like a mofo.
Especially over 6 weeks, so that's got to be a big adjustment every time. Yeah. Results were that they were able to stretch both a bit. Still, left leg approximately half an inch shorter than the right. And then she writes her side effects of polio that she had. Legs that ache almost constantly. Tylenol and Advil do not help.
Even today?
I guess so.
Oh, that's terrible.
Shorter left leg that definitely impacts my skeletal posture. She's fractured her left ankle 2 times. She's broken her left leg once. She's had a right knee replacement due to arthritis and overuse because of the weaker left leg.
Yep.
She's had multiple back fusions. As she, quote unquote, matures, strength in both her legs is weakening. The left leg gets a little thinner and weaker each year. The bone density is less dense than the right, and the leg bone is much thinner. I mean, you can definitely see it. Each day I'm reminded of what I can and cannot physically do, but I keep pushing the limit. I often wonder how different my life would have been if the polio vaccine had been perfected just a little sooner. And she wrote, sorry, once I got started, memories and emotions took control. It's so funny because that's what my cousin said about the firework episode about his thumb. Like, I couldn't believe, like, what it did to me when I wrote it all down. But I thought she did a very good job of writing it all down. She did.
And it just, to think she's still dealing with it today.
It's still affecting. She's had multiple back surgeries because everything's off.
Has she lived a good life, though? Like, has she,
I mean, no, she's active and she does everything. She works, she does all that. But it's just, you have pain all your life from
wishing the vaccine had been around. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, a little earlier. Just a little earlier that it was perfected.
Yep. Ira, God bless his soul.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so thank you for writing that.
That's quite a story.
Yeah. So, what do you got?
Oh, what do I have?
Something we never want.
Tell me what you know about the Spanish flu.
It killed 8,000 million people.
Did you ever hear of it before I started talking about it?
I have heard of it.
Okay. Mike, have you heard about the Spanish flu?
Spanish fly?
Yeah, close. I started researching this and was stunned at how intense it was, and even more shocked that nobody knows about it. It was like, what do you know about the Black Plague?
It killed 800.
Right. You hear about the Black Plague in history books. The Spanish flu killed as many people as the Black Plague, and nobody talks about it. It's unbelievable. Okay, so I got my information from Wikipedia, my new favorite website, Smithsonian.com.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And I'm not going to lie, I got so excited about this episode because when I started reading into it, there was A, a ton of information on it, and B, I couldn't believe how extreme it was when it happened. And this is the flu. This is the flu that we still have today. Yeah. It was intense. So the American Experience, which is this series on PBS, had a whole episode just for the Spanish flu of 1918. And so I was sitting and watching with one of our coworkers, and it had the creepiest, like, nursery rhyme at the beginning of it. And there's these little girls, and they jump roping, and it's like, I had a little bird whose name was Enza. Open the door and influenza. Like, this is what kids were singing. Creepy-ass kids.
Because everyone's dying.
Yeah, because everybody's dying. Okay. So the Spanish flu of 1918 started in January of 1918. It ended in December of 1920. Jesus. But it came in like 3 phases. In total, it's believed to have killed 50 to 100 million people.
50. I was kidding when I said 800,000
to 100 million people.
50 to 100 million.
Okay. Mm-hmm. In the first 25 weeks, it killed more than AIDS has killed in 25 years. Okay.
Oh my God.
To this day, it is responsible for more American deaths this century than all of the wars combined. Okay?
Are you kidding?
I am dead serious. This was no joke. In total, in the United States alone, it killed 675,000 people, which is more than we have lost in all of the wars combined in this century. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, more.
Oh, my God.
The only pandemic worse than the Spanish flu was the Black Plague. And the only reason they can't decide which was worse is because the numbers of the Middle Ages, the population was smaller. It was bad.
Yeah.
So the origins of the flu were debated. Some believe it started at a hospital camp in Etaples, France. I don't know. It's somewhere in France, all right?
It's French.
The camp had a live piggery on it, and it had poultry.
That's what that's called?
Yeah, like where you keep pigs. Piggery. Piggery. That's where my mother lived, like, up the hill from a piggery. Ew. She talks about it all the time. Like, oh, yeah, must smell fucking great in the summer. So they had a live piggery on camp, and they had poultry that was brought in from the village. Most of these flus generate with pigs or poultry. Mm-hmm. Pigs are like the closest things to us, so they can brew a lot of shit that can get transferred to us. Mm-hmm. Goddamn pigs. So Others think it started in China. Some say Austria. But the most common theory is that it started in Haskell County, Kansas.
Oh, Kansas.
Haskell County, Kansas.
I wouldn't have guessed that one.
You would know. See? I am a wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So a physician in Haskell County, Kansas, named Louis Minor, alerted the U.S. Public Health Service in January of 1918 about the unusual flu activity of the year.
Mm-hmm.
The Santa Fe Monitor reported that Miss Eva Van Alstyne is sick with pneumonia. Ralph Linderman is still quite sick. I'm sorry, I got to turn the page. The young son of Ernest Elliott is sick with pneumonia. Most everybody over the county is sick with la gripe or pneumonia. La gripe. Yeah,
I'm
like
gonna
that.
say
I think
I have
la
la
gripe
gripe.
is a... I got la
gonna
gripe.
call
Usually
out
it's of
with
my
la gripe.
bowels. So, a few of these Haskell County men who are sick end up going to the military base camp Funston in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to this camp Funston. So on March 4th, the first soldier, company cook Albert Gitchell, becomes first known case of influenza for 1918.
Mm-hmm.
And so starts phase 1 of the flu epidemic.
Okay.
Camp Funston is a huge training base for guys going into World War I. So we had 1918.
Mm-hmm.
We have just entered the 4th or 5th year of World War I. It's a huge training base. They're going over. So within days of Albert Gitchell getting sick on March 4th, 522 men get sick. Within 2 weeks, 1,100 soldiers are sick and 35 die.
Oh, my God.
The 6 soldiers carried the flu with them to 24 of the 36 training camps in the U.S. and then brought it overseas.
Uh-huh.
So it was like, initially, it wasn't a big deal. Phase 1's not a big deal. It's a 3-day flu. People were calling it the 3-day fever. Not many people are dying from it. It only gets attention when it sweeps through Spain. This is how it gets its name. So the war, we're all at war.
Right.
The Germans are getting sick, but they're not going to tell anybody their field's getting sick. And the French are getting sick, but they're not going to tell anybody. The Americans aren't getting sick. Spain's neutral. They're like, oh, guess what? We're all getting sick over here. And the king's sick. And this one's sick. Boom, Spanish flu. Okay. But it's
not really Spanish.
It's not really like the Spaniards were like, we're going to make you sick. It's because they're the only ones going to talk about it because they're not at war.
Right.
I mean, I would think in war, you don't want everybody knowing you're like la gripe.
Yeah, we're all dying.
Attack them now. Okay. So that's how it gets the label of the Spanish flu. In the initial phase, this is a quote, the initial phase was so faint as to be hardly perceptible or was altogether lacking and was everywhere a mild form. The few ominous signs of phase 1 are that those who did die were healthy young adults.
Yeah. I was going to say that when you said they were at the camp and 35
Yes.
guys. I'm like, these are young.
So usually when you have flu deaths, it's little kids or old people. This is striking young males.
Yeah.
Really. In some of the flu deaths, they're misdiagnosed as meningitis because of the hemorrhages in the lung tissue. So they're like, oh, it's meningitis. This wasn't the flu. So by July, the Army Medical Bulletin reports from France that the epidemic is about to end and it has throughout been a type of benign flu. A British journal flat out says the flu has completely disappeared. Now, if this was a movie you're doing about this flu epidemic of 1918, you're going to have a guy in a podium saying flu epidemic has disappeared. And you're going to have a guy on the boat behind him going,
yeah.
Ominous foreshadowing. Okay. So, you see little dust particles like Stranger Things kind of floating around the air. It's going to get bad. So in August, it resurfaces in Switzerland. And it's such a virulent form that the U.S. Naval Intelligence, in a document marked, quote, secret and confidential, warns that the disease, now epidemic throughout Switzerland, is what is commonly known as the Black Plague, although it is designated as Spanish sickness or la gripe. Phase 2 has now officially begun. So now we fast forward, United States, picture it. Fort Devens, Massachusetts, September 1st, 1918. The hospital at Fort Devens can hold 1,200 patients of the 45,000 soldiers that are stationed there. On September 1st, there are 84 patients at the hospital. September 7th, soldier shows up at the hospital, delirious, and he screams when he's touched. He is diagnosed with meningitis. The next day, a dozen more meningitis cases show up. Now doctors are like, no, this is the flu. This is the flu. And when it peaks at Devon's, 1,543 soldiers have come in one day.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. So now the hospital's overwhelmed. Doctors are sick. The nurses are sick. Cafeteria workers are sick. So no one's there to even feed the camp.
Right.
The hospital has to shut down, leaving thousands more sick and dying just in the barracks. Like,
oh, my God.
It's a shit show. So Roy Geist is a hospital physician, and he writes that men start appearing to be an ordinary attack of la grippe. Mm-hmm. Or influenza. And when brought to the hospital, they very rapidly developed the most vicious type of pneumonia that has ever been seen. 2 hours after admission, they have mahogany spots over their cheeks, and a few hours later, cyanosis, which is your lips get blue, your fingertips get blue, you're turning blue.
You're not getting oxygen.
Yep. Extending to the face. It's only a matter of a few hours then until death comes. Oh. It's horrible. We have been averaging about 100 deaths per day. For several days, there were no coffins and bodies were piling up something fierce.
Oh, my God.
So this is what he's writing.
Mm-hmm.
Devon's and the Boston area are the first to be hit by phase 2, and within weeks, it's worldwide. So as September is continuing and the flu is spreading, the government is making it worse. They don't want anybody talking about this flu. Mm-hmm. They want to just, let's whitewash it, morale, we're at war, we got to talk, making this great. So number one problem is the military's taking all your best doctors. So anybody who knows even remotely what to do, they're shipped overseas. Number two is they lied, and then they passed the Sedition Act that said it made it punishable up to 20 years in prison to utter, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, or abusive language about the government, which also means spreading word that people are getting sick from this flu. Mm-hmm. That became a public offense. So this gets out to the public health officials, so they're lying about it to everybody. Right. No, this isn't the flu. No, you're fine. Mm-hmm. Number three, Navy ships from Boston have now gone to Philly, and they bring the soldiers and the flu. Oh, God. So day one, shipyard. Boat arrives from Boston. Soldiers get off the ship. Day one, the shipyard erupts with flu. Oh, public health director Wilmer Krusnin, I like that, declares he would confine this disease to its present limits, and in this we are sure to be successful. No one died, no concern. Day two.
That was day one. He made that
day one. Next day, 2 sailors die of the flu. Not the Spanish flu, it's the old-fashioned flu. From now on, this disease will decrease. Oh. Day 3, 14 sailors die, 1 civilian. Each day.
More and more.
More and more are dying. And each day, the public is not told this is bad. By September 26th, the Spanish flu has hit the whole country, and the Army had to cancel the nationwide draft. No, they're not drafting anybody now, no matter how bad it is, because this flu is so goddamn bad. Philly has scheduled a huge parade for September 28th, the Liberty Loan Parade. Oh. And, sorry, that's my page turning. Thousands are going to pack the streets, close contact. Doctors are begging this Cruson to cancel it because they know if you get these people all together, the flu's going to go crazy. Yeah. They talk to concerned reporters. They tell them, write about the dangers, but the editors refuse to print the articles. They won't do it. Mm-hmm. 2 days after the parade, Cruson concedes that the epidemic was bad, but not that bad. Don't panic.
Okay.
The newspapers print that scientific nursing has halted the epidemic.
Oh.
I don't know what scientific nursing is, and it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Nurses had no impact because there were no nurses. Out of 3,100 requests for nurses, only 193 people could show up because they're just as sick as the rest of the population. Right. Okay? Finally, Cruson orders all schools closed, banned all public gatherings throughout, and the paper says, it's not a public health measure, don't panic. In Philadelphia, 759 people would die in one day.
Oh, my God.
It's so bad, it's like a scene out of Monty Python. They would tell the people, put your bodies on the porch at night. We'll come around and pick them up. Bring out your dead. Like, that bad. The priests would drive horse-drawn carriages down the street for people. They would bring out their dead, and they would be in mass graves. By the end, Philly lost 1,200 people in 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
No, I'm sorry.
12,000.
12,000 people in 6 weeks. So over a 4-day period in October. Now, October, when you watch the series and everything, they're like, you had September and then you had October. October was the worst month, the month that most Americans have ever died, the worst month for America.
Yeah.
So over a 4-day period in October, Camp Pike admits 8,000 soldiers who were sick. San Antonio, 53% of the population got sick. Now, I mean, people know that the government's lying. The towns and cities, they know they're lying because the towns and cities are running out of coffins. So when you watch that PBS series, they are interviewing people who had it and survived, people who lost family members. And this one guy is like, they're old now because it's over 100 years old when this happened. So this must have been filmed a while ago. So he's like, I was 10 years old. He said, we go down the street and we were in front of the funeral parlor. He said, and there's all these boxes stacked in front of the funeral parlor. He's like, me and my 4 friends were jumping on the boxes, pretending they're pyramids. We're all over these boxes. He goes, I go home and I tell my mom, guess what we were doing? And she's like, never go down there again. Those were coffins. Those were bodies. The 3 kids he was jumping with all died from the flu. Oh my God. From jumping on those boxes.
From getting into, yeah.
And he's like, I don't know how I didn't get it. He's like, but I was knocking on doors. Hey, Mrs. Smith, where's Jimmy? And she'd be like, go ask your mother. He's not around anymore. Oh my God. Hey, Mrs. Smith, where's Rob? Go ask your mother. And he's like, I went back to school. Half my class had died from the Spanish flu. Oh my God. And you have a story of another kid his mother sent him to go live with the aunt because she was afraid he was going to get the Spanish flu. She died from the Spanish flu. He got it. He survived it. She died from it. And he's like, my life is just never the same. Once you lose your mother, never the same. So it is written that, so the government's like screwed because there's nobody to take care of these sick people. There's so many sick people. All who are free from the care of the sick at home report for emergency work. No one comes. Michigan, whole families are sick and no one will come to help. Kentucky, Connecticut, same reports. People won't go out. They don't even want to breathe. Shops close. Schools close. Streets are empty. The Red Cross wrote, a fear and panic of the flu, akin to the terror of the Middle Ages regarding the Black Plague, has been prevalent in many parts of the country. So doctors are writing that they're out and there's nobody on the streets. Right. And anybody you do see is wearing a mask. And they said the flu is wearing a mask trying to protect yourself from the flu was like wearing chicken wire to protect yourself from dust. It didn't do shit. Because they don't really even know at this point what is causing it. They think it's a bacterial infection. Yeah. So now we have October. October sees 195,000 Americans die, making it the deadliest month in American history.
That's unbelievable.
The healthcare workers can't tend to the sick. And when you come to, this is like unbelievable too. So when you would go to the hospital, bringing my mom in, she's got the flu. They would half wrap her in like body wrappings, toe tag her, because they knew by that afternoon she was dead. Oh my God. So you were half prepared for death when you showed up. I was like, wow, that's something. I want to do that sometimes, though. You'd be like, if I can dead, let's go. Come on.
Let's just start now.
I'm going to put you in the shroud right now. No. Okay.
What's your name? I'm just putting this under your feet. Just hold on a second.
There's no grave diggers to even bury the dead, so there's mass graves used. They're just using these huge diggers, dumping them all in, because they don't have enough coffins. They don't have grave diggers.
And they're going to do something with the bodies.
Right. Yeah. People are coming up with contraptions. So they're wearing mothballs around their necks. They're wearing garlic around their necks. And they're wearing...
It's like vampires.
This kid that's talking about his friends on the coffins, he's sitting there, and there's a picture of all of them together, and they're all wearing camphor around their neck, which is like mothballs. So people are blaming the German-based Bayer company for poisoning everyone. They think the Germans are poisoning people with Bayer aspirin.
World War I, so everything's...
So now it's worldwide. You have Western Samoa, 90% of the population is affected. Most of them die. It was wiping out whole civilizations. They're having a problem with it because they have a tradition that they're tribal, and if you're dying, you orally give the tradition of the tribe. So as you're dying with the flu, you're in his face trying to get the tradition, so you're going to get sick too. Victor Vaughn, head of the Army's Communicable Disease Division, writes, and he's like not one to pan, he's a very stoic guy. Mm-hmm. If the epidemic continues its mathematical rate of acceleration, civilization could easily disappear from the face of the earth in a few weeks. That's how fast it's killing everybody. Right. He thinks we're done. Everybody's dying. Yeah. By November, gone. No more plague. Gone. So, Armistice Day is November 11th, 1918. That's the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. The October before, the Spanish flu is killing everybody. World War I, excuse me. The Spanish flu is killing everyone. By November 11th, it's basically gone. A third wave comes in from January 1919, and it ends in the spring. April 3rd, 1919, you have the Versailles Peace Conference. Mm-hmm. Woodrow Wilson is at the April 30th, 1919, where he's the president. They're deciding what to do with Germany and all the other countries that were in the war. Mm-hmm. His secretary, his male secretary, has just died from the flu. While he's there, he collapses from the flu. And they believe that this is why he made such disastrous decisions during that conference. And because that conference and that treaty is a direct result of why World War II happened. Mm-hmm. So they think he was sick with the flu and he was delirious and he could not make right decisions. So after 1918, the flu was around, but the immune systems now could fight it, and it stopped invading the lungs. So it was going not just in your lungs, it would get in, mm-hmm. and it would cause, I forgot the word for it, but it was some kind of a infection storm. So what would happen is it would get into your lungs, but it would go deep into your lungs. And your body would have because you're young and you're healthy, such a hyperactive reaction to it, your lungs would fill with fluid and you would die.
Oh, God.
It's like a I have it written down somewhere. Of course, I don't have it with me right now. I think that's why now they go on ECMO.
Yeah.
Which is a lung bypass machine, mm-hmm. because it's usually young people mm-hmm. who are battling the flu, end mm-hmm. up on ECMO, and I think it's because they're having a hyperreaction to it infecting their lungs. Okay. So part of the reason it had settled down is because it wasn't going as deep in the lungs. People are building up an immunity mm-hmm. to it. So as I said, in total, 675,000 Americans died, more than the combined total of all the wars in the 20th century. It's second to the Black Plague. Again, those numbers are off because right. Tonga, 8% of the population died. New Zealand, 8,500 deaths. Ireland, 10% of the population dies. Savannah, Chatham County, Georgia, 6,500 deaths out of 83,000 people. 12,000 in Australia. Overall, 50 to 100 million people died from the flu. Crazy. So during the epidemic, they're trying to come up with a vaccine, but they think it's a bacteria because in 1918, the microscopes are not strong enough to see viruses. Mm-hmm. They can only see bacteria. Mm-hmm. So they came up with a vaccine, didn't do shit. Right. So in 1935, close to 15 years later, Frank McFarland, Burnett, and Wilson Smith separately discovered that you can grow the influenza virus on eggs. By 1938, Thomas Francis Jr. with Jonas Salk administers the vaccine to the United States military. Mm-hmm. So the first people in the United States to get a flu vaccine for the very first time is the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. Now we're vaccinating people. In 1968, the Hong Kong or Asian flu creates another global pandemic with huge mortality rate. Mm-hmm. 1997, another avian flu creates a pandemic. Mm-hmm. 2009 flu season, H1N1, which is the same flu that hit in 1918, had more than 200,000 deaths in the first 12 months of its circulation. Mm-hmm. 200,000 deaths from the 2000. Flu. That was 10 years ago. Yeah. It's no joke. And in 2018, 80,000 people died from the flu, with more than 48.8 million people getting sick. The highest since the 2009 pandemic. Mm-hmm. Which is why you get your goddamn flu shot.
Yeah.
Now, I have a girlfriend who works for Lloyd's office, and she's like, I don't get the flu shot because you can get Guillain-Barré, you can get this. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
But if you don't get it, you can die.
Yeah.
You can recover from Guillain-Barré. Mm-hmm. You can recover from a nerve damage. Mm-hmm. You're not going to recover if you die.
No.
And we see people come in every year.
Yep.
Young.
Healthy.
Young college kids coming in, putting on hot lung machines, and not coming back out.
No. From the flu.
From the flu.
It sounds stupid.
It
Because
does.
everyone says, oh, I have the flu. A, you don't actually have the flu normally when you're
Right.
saying you have the flu. But B, these people are young, healthy, active. They didn't feel good for a couple of days, and they are literally dead
Dead.
a few days later.
Yep. We do those DCDs, which is you donate your organs after your heart stopped. I've done a couple, and they've been flu people. And it shocks me every time. And what I want to, I really want to do this podcast, this particular episode, trying to be really unbiased, but I want to strangle people when they're like, I'm not going to get the flu shot. And I'm like, oh, it made me sick. I'm like, that didn't
That's
make
not
you sick.
No.
All right? I'll show you sick. That didn't make you sick. You weren't on ECMO.
No.
Get your goddamn flu shot. I want to strangle people.
Yeah.
And I can't even get into the people who are like, well, I'm not vaccinating because it causes autism, which is a flat out lie.
Yeah.
A flat out lie.
Huge.
So you'd rather your kid die or be blind or sterile or
have-
crippled
Right.
than have autism? Really?
Right. And it's not going to give them autism anyways. But
No.
I digress. I mean,
Well, I'm going to be an anti-seatbelter and an anti-parachute person because who believes in that? Parachutes don't save people. Seatbelts don't save people. It pisses me off. I can't even say how much it pisses me off. All
you
right.
stayed real neutral.
I can't. I had to get it out there. Feel free to email me. We can go toe to toe on this. All right. This is the only episode because I just
We literally
see it.
And my son, like I've said on a million episodes now, I feel like they don't believe me. They think I'm just making this up because everything I say, I'm like, I see this. They're like, there's no way you see all this.
no, we do.
Every year, I'm like, this is why you get a flu shot.
Yes.
Because these people were as healthy as I am, and they are now dead
Right.
from the flu. Like, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Get it.
Please. And just measles. It's not just a simple childhood disease.
No.
Measles blind you. Measles deafen you. Measles sterilize you.
Yeah.
Chicken pox can deafen you. You can get encephalitis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could go on and on with all these different, they maim you.
Right.
There's a reason we are vaccinating against them.
Right. And it's not like people just make a vaccine for every single thing that ever comes. It's
Right.
things that have killed or maimed
Right.
tons of
And you
it
know
has
what?
to have had serious side effects to go through all that to
Right.
make a vaccine.
And you can always look at, they have to have them before you go to school. You can spread them out. You don't have to have 15 vaccines at one office visit. They'll spread them out for you.
Right.
They'll work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Get your kids vaccinated.
And it's not even your kids. It's the kids who can't, who are sick,
Yes.
who then your kid's going to carry it. And you know what? Right. Your kids might not get very sick from it. They might just carry it. They might get
Right.
a little fever for a couple days. There's other kids who will die.
Can you
when they get
live
it.
with killing the newborn baby who
Right.
hasn't had their vaccines yet
Right.
and now has measles because your kid didn't get vaccinated?
Right.
Can you live with that?
I know.
Because I couldn't.
No.
I could never forgive myself.
Yeah.
All right. I'm done. I'm off my soapbox. I'm putting it away.
Neutral. Very neutral.
Yeah, that was real neutral.
We have no opinion either way.
Can't imagine how you feel. All right. I'm sorry. I can't be quiet about this one.
No.
Okay.
You lasted
About a
almost the
second,
whole
yeah.
episode, though.
You know what? I think that's pretty good for me.
I do.
All right. I really went far with that. And I won't get political ever again, but vaccines are a sore spot because you're hurting other people.
Vaccines aren't even political. It's just
I can't even believe people think. I just can't even. I can't even believe people think it's like,
I know.
I'm not going to do that.
I know.
I can't even believe people that crosses somebody's head.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? The people saying this have been vaccinated.
Right. You were
So you're
vaccinated.
not going to get sick, but you're going to let your kid die. You're like,
No.
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So on that note, I think this episode is coming to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what we're doing next, but we're doing something good. Oh, I know what we're doing next.
You know what
We're doing next. You're going to like the next episode.
Nice surprise.
Yep.
Yep.
So again, send us stories in. We'd love to hear them.
Please.
We would love to hear them. And if you have a very strong opinion about what we had to say on this episode, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah. We'll
Take it on.
Yeah, we're fine with it.
All right, ladies and gents, have a great night, and we will see you in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Get your flu shot. Like, subscribe, rate, and review the Scissors and Scrubs podcast on whatever podcast app you listen to us on. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Scissors and Scrubs. And email us any of your stories or thoughts to scissorsnscrubs@gmail.com.